We're joined right now by our Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, just got back from Ukraine. Secretary Pompeo, I want to go first to you on this. You were in Ukraine this week. Tell our listeners what you were doing there and what you saw, what you learned.
Well, thanks, Jordan. I was there. I got to spend an entire day. I took a group of American business leaders and some great Christian relief organizations that have been doing good work on the ground there, E3 Solutions and Samaritan's Purse, people will be familiar with, who are trying to help through this enormous humanitarian crisis. We got a chance to visit Irpin, where, of course, we have a town that was destroyed from the attacks from Vladimir Putin. And then we met with Ukrainian business people and the Ukrainian government leadership, trying to figure out how it is we can best help them secure their sovereignty, their freedom, their independence in a way that's consistent with America. What are the things that matter to America? How can we, as business leaders, folks who are no longer in government service, do that? And trying to understand what were the tools they actually needed that can prevent Vladimir Putin from controlling not only Ukraine, but eventually more of Europe as well.
You know, you met with, and we put the image up on the screen for people watching our broadcast. You met with President Zelenskyy as well while you were there. It seemed like we got into a bit of a stalemate situation over the winter. What do the leaders there think is going to happen once this is it going? Are we going to see again this as we get into a second year of war, and we're into the springtime? Is it going to be that all-out war that we saw just restarting again? I mean, what is their feeling?
No, it's definitely a nasty conflict where the lines are people are exchanging meters of terrain, right? Yards of terrain. A stalemate is a reasonable description of that. But of course, each side is trying to make sure they have the industrial capability to do what they need and the military ability to do what they need. President Zelenskyy was pretty clear. I met with 300 Ukrainian students, remarkable young people. It's interesting, Jordan. They were never part of the Soviet Union. They don't get it when Putin says, "No, you're part of us." They grew up at a different time. It's just never been part of their lives, and they are determined. And all they've asked for is American stuff. And the thing is, if we don't do that, if we don't help them be successful, they're going to, I think, work to build out a counteroffensive over the coming months to retake a significant piece of the land in Ukraine. If we don't help them, if we don't continue to provide support behind the Europeans who need to do this in the first instance, it'll end up costing American families even more, not just taxpayer money to prevent this from happening in Finland or Moldova or Estonia, but even more importantly, we all know that Vladimir Putin, in charge of the red winter wheat that moves through the Black Sea, of Ukrainian factories, of all the important commercial operations inside of Ukraine, that's a bad thing for every family in the United States, and we ought to continue to provide the tools they need to ultimately claim victory against Vladimir Putin.
It does seem, Secretary Pompeo, one of the issues has been that the Biden administration is not totally clear in communicating their goals, strategies, how they see this even possibly coming to an end. And so the American people, I think rightfully so, they question, it's not the idea that we don't want to stop Putin and we want to support the Ukrainian people. Like you said, it was, I think, great to point out there, you met with students who never experienced life in the Soviet Union or life under Russian control. This idea that Putin talks about, this is part of us. They never had that. But like that kind of communication isn't made clearly by our current leaders. So what could they do differently to kind of, I think, re-engage the American public on why this is so important?
George, you're absolutely right. The American people have a right to have answers and to get clarity from this government, from our government. And the Biden administration has just tragically failed in explaining why it matters, what we're actually doing, why we're doing it. And they could do better at that. The second thing is they've been so timid. I think had they provided the resources at the front end, you remember all the debates about are we going to send medium-range stuff, short-range stuff. Had we done this at the front end, this could be over. They could have crushed Putin at a moment of a maximal weakness, and they didn't. Instead, they were so afraid that they were going to provoke and already provoked Vladimir Putin that this extended. And the humanitarian stuff that you saw on the ground, I mean, Jordan, you've been to these places in your life too. You see these families that lost everything, and they've now lost a brother or a father or a grandpa. I mean, it's just absolutely a human tragedy that could have been avoided with American power being used in a way that did the deterrence that we achieved there for 4 years. That's the tragedy of what has happened. And the answer to that tragedy is clarity to the American people. Why does it matter here? And providing them the things they need now to end this conflict, to convince Vladimir Putin that the cost of continuing is invasion of Ukraine and the death and destruction of Ukrainian innocents exceeds the benefit. That's the model. That's what Biden should go. You should go to the Oval Office. You give a primetime address explaining why it is we're doing what we're doing and demanding that the Europeans do more at the same time.
I think that's what's been missing here. I mean, we missed that opportunity, like you said early on, to deter this from ever happening. And I think if it was a different administration, it was the administration you were serving in, it wouldn't have happened when you were Secretary of State. That deterrence would have been put in place so that the conflict never occurred. But then now we have to deal with the reality that the conflict is now entering its second year, and the U.S. is very involved, and people want to see at least a plan on how it comes to a conclusion. So, again, a lot of this is communications to the American people, and then, of course, the communications to the world. I want to turn to the reports this week on, the Chinese spy balloon. We haven't talked about it yet on the broadcast this week, that it was able to intercept signals, intelligence, and communications from U.S. military bases, and it kind of confirmed what we had feared, that it was getting this kind of intel that they had not been able to get before. Is this another failed test? I mean, is it seems like one of the bigger failures of the Biden administration?
Jordan, I must say, when I heard this week that now it's pretty clear they did surveil us with this balloon, right? The administration said we didn't shoot it down, but that's okay because we had this thing jammed, we had this prevented. It's all good, nothing to see here, folks. This turns out to have been at least wrong and maybe a lie. And we now know that they did surveil us. And the Biden administration should be clear about what they collected, why they collected it. They have this thing. They should show the American people what they did. All of this matters because the Biden administration's weakness is going to continue to drive Communist Party aggression from China. And that's for every American family. That's a big deal. And the fact that they misled the American public and said, Montana, Kansas, Iowa, wherever this damn thing flew over, our biggest, most important military sites in America, don't worry, we have this all under control, proved false. And I promise you, the Chinese Communist Party knew it was false when the Biden administration was saying it. And now, what an embarrassment to the world. The people watching this from all across the world are going to trust the Biden administration even less. It's the damnedest thing. This deterrence model that we built for 4 years is now fundamentally broken, and the risk of a series of cascading crises is even greater.
Well, I was going to turn to another one. I mean, we see China at the heart of all of these. China brokering deals between Saudi Arabia and Iran, China brokering a deal with Russia, and now I went to Taiwan. So the president of Taiwan was in California. Speaker McCarthy hosted the president, and we've got, of course, the comments from the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, denouncing this meeting, threatening this meeting. But the bigger picture is, how do we get ahead of China on the Taiwan issue so that the deterrence is there that should have been in Ukraine as well, so that conflict, which you said, it was like a very dangerous cascading world right now, doesn't just one day we wake up to the news and, now China's invading Taiwan.
Well, John, I was happy that Speaker McCarthy met with the Taiwanese leader in California at the Reagan Library. What a powerful message to send about the Reagan model of peace through strength and we win, you lose. Now is time for all of it. By the way, it was bipartisan. That's fantastic and important too. Now's the time to actually not shortchange the actual tasks that need to have. What does that mean? That means building a military that is capable, not based on diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? This means building a military that isn't concerned about climate change, but rather on defeating our adversaries, empowering the Asian countries, Japan, South Korea, folks in these and further south in the Pacific, the Australians and the Pacific Islanders, empowering them to, in the first instance, take the lead in confronting the Chinese in Taiwan. But it's very, very clear. The Chinese Communist Party will use this moment to begin to blockade, to inspect ships. They're talking about that already, stopping commercial traffic in international waters, boarding ships. This is a very dangerous precedent, and this would be the precursor to an invasion of Taiwan. We're going to have to put assets there. We're going to have to help these other countries build out their strength, and we're going to have to get the Taiwanese the tools and systems they need to do precisely what Ukraine has been able to do, defend their own sovereignty. I'm confident the people of Taiwan will fight for that, and we need to do the things we can to support them so we can keep America safe and strong and prosperous as well.
Secretary Pompeo, we appreciate everything, all the insight as well. Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, we appreciate you joining us.